Dearest gentle listeners, and welcome to another episode of Lady Whistledown, a Bridgerton podcast. This podcast will cover all things in the Bridgerton universe, from the TV series, the side series like Queen Charlotte, and also the books. If you are not up to date with the first half of season 3, please go and watch that, then pop back when you're all caught up, because this podcast will contain spoilers. In the last episode, we changed the format of this podcast episode to be more of an informal, free flow ideas sharing of minds with my dear friend Patty. If you would like to introduce yourself once again.
I am Patty. I am from America and I love Bridgerton and I enjoyed immensely our last conversation.
You also run a TikTok account.
I have a TikTok, Teatime with Lady P. Thank you for bringing that up, but it basically was to help me get the thoughts out of my brain so that I could sleep.
And I think that's very much what this series has done for the both of us. We have both so many ideas, so many summaries, we've seen so much symbolism and so much depth to this show that we kind of saw that in each other's ideas, and we came together and decided to form this. And hopefully, if everyone enjoys this format, that we will transition into being a duo podcast. Hopefully that is to be in the works very soon. Once I get a clear microphone, we can get everything up and running. In the last episode, we talked mostly about season 1, Polin and Penelope's development, their unease with each other, their unease with the feelings that they have for each other, and how deeply Colin has really pushed those down. The introduction of Marina into their little love duo and how that affected them. And in this episode today, we will find the conclusion of the Marina interruption into their relationship and talk about how the season is very much setting them up for a future together. Now, we must make haste into today's episode. In the last episode, we left off at the races. So we were discussing Penelope and Colin at the races. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the letters that they were sending to each other and the meaning?
Yes. First of all, I know that Bridgerton is kind of a suspension of reality. We know that the Regency era had a lot of rules, but it is very, very important to note that in Regency era, unmarried persons do not write each other. So the fact that they are writing each other, and at least I don't think his family really knows about it until she brings it up to Eloise at the beginning of season 2, that she has been communicating with Colin, and Eloise thinks nothing of it. And then her family finds out she's writing. They don't know she's sending, I think, and they mock her for it, like he would never be your friend. But it is really kind of unheard of, and they tend to break the societal rules all the time, interestingly enough. But when she's buying another quill, like she's talking about writing back and forth, she absolutely loves getting his letters. She loves responding back. It is probably what made her whole summer. Obviously, he brings it up at the races, like, you write and replied to more of my letters than anyone else. And she's just gushing, like, don't tell me how you are. I know how you are. You climbed Mount Olympus. Like, she's telling him back his adventure. She's not waiting to hear about them from him. It's like she was there with him. She's just as excited about them. And it really did, exchanging these letters elevated their relationship because there was no society involved. It was just him communicating with her. And it's the first time, like, it's probably the longest private conversation that they've ever had.
That Eloise could not interrupt.
Yes, that Eloise could not interfere with.
And I think another point to note is that over the summer, Penelope does not have Lady Whistledown. Like, she has Eloise, but Lady Whistledown is something that gives her purpose. And over the summer, she doesn't write her columns. That is entirely only when the season has begun, that is when she begins her column, got Colin on the mind, when she starts her column once again. So in the meantime, her new passion is kind of through experiencing Colin's travels, because as we know, women are not really allowed to travel I mean, they probably can with husbands, but it's still not something that we really see. Like we see in season 3, Anthony and Kate traveling to India, but that's for a specific purpose. We don't hear of any other females traveling in the series.
They don't travel till they go on their honeymoon trip, usually.
And even the honeymoon trip sounds, from the likes of it, it sounds like it was always somewhere really close by, because obviously back then we didn't have planes, and if they did, I don't think I'd hop on one. So it was a very extensive time and financial burden to travel.
Yes. And a point I would like to make about her writing the letters, as much as they are to Colin, and she loves, she is encouraging him, and I think she believes she's helping him through the whole Marina situation, the debacle that was, but she's also using the letters to keep up her writing skills.
Yeah, very much so. We have discussed this, how we wanted to do this podcast together because in having our own passions and getting to express that in form of podcasts, in form of getting to talk with one another. And this is rare. Like I have friends who, yes, watch Bridgerton, but not on the way that I watch Bridgerton. I watch Bridgerton and then I rewatch Bridgerton, and then I go back and I ignore all the words and I look at the interactions and I look at the facial features, I look at the props, I look at the scenes, I look at the sets.
Today I looked at jewelry.
Jewelry. Yes, exactly. And you are very much on the same mindset of me, of when you have a passion and you get to experience that passion with another person, it is on a whole other level. We are experiencing this passion together, and it's why we are now doing this podcast, because we get to take everyone else along the ride who may not have that person in their life who they want to, delve into on that level. So people get to listen along with us. They get to form their own ideas. They get to listen. Oh, I really like that perspective. And that is sort of what Colin's doing with these letters. Penelope cannot go traveling, but as we've said, passion inspires passion in others. And Colin is so passionate about his travels. Listen to Penelope actually sounds more passionate about his travels upon him returning and then talking at the races than Colin. And it's not that he's not passionate. It's that they see that fire within each other, and it inspires it in each other, and it excites each other to see someone else to be so passionate about something. It brings them together in a way.
Yes. And I think that he fueled her passion for writing unbeknownst to him, because he could have written back and said, wow, do you have nothing better to do? But he didn't. He never discouraged her from sending him another letter. He, and in the 2 conversations where he talked about her letters, he's like, you read and responded to more of my letters than anyone else. And then in that one conversation where he tells her that she's his friend, but I think that's a whole different conversation about him choosing words. He's not a writer yet, but in that conversation, he started learning about himself through her eyes. And imagine what, for a writer, for someone who has a love of writing, to hear that. I mean, she's like, you traveled with yourself, come on. But I would have been like, he's inspired by my words, right? That's high praise.
And it is. And the conversation that they have in the next scene is much where, she gets pulled away. Eloise interrupts again, just as he says, oh, I wasn't alone on my travels. And poor Penelope, she's sitting here like, oh no, he's found another person. He's moved on. I've missed my shot again. He's choosing someone else over me. And as we know in season 1, we both have the consensus that he did not choose Marina over her. He just didn't know that she was an option. He didn't even consider that she was an option. But here,
he refused to consider her.
Yeah. And Penelope's got such low self-esteem that she's like, oh, here he is. He's gone again. Like, I'm never going to get the boy of my dreams. And even though she thinks it's just an absolute fantasy and something that she holds dear to her heart as something that she never believes will come true, even when he is on a carriage floor professing his love, she does not see it.
She's shaking her head and everything.
Like, what are you talking about? Have you been taking that special? What was the powder that he brings back?
Yeah,
from
that
his,
powder, that tea. Yeah,
he's been drinking the tea.
He's been drinking the tea.
But he's been drinking the Penelope tea. Don't you worry, Penelope.
Yeah, because even in that one, we have his first pause where everything you know that he wants to say but he can't is in his pauses. And that scene at the races is the first one where he starts to say her name, he wants to say something, and he pauses, and then he's like, how have you been? Like, that's not what he wanted to say, and you physically can see it.
And it harkens back to that societal rules of society has a way of you can't ever share your true feelings, no matter how close you are. Even if you are married, you are bound to say the things that are proper. Everything has to be done in a certain way. He goes to go say the things he wants to. Oh, that's not proper. Oh, that's not a thing that you say to your little sister's best friend, and he changes it. He
Yeah.
controls him, and that's not something that we ever see him do with Marina. He's not controlling himself. He's just, this is how it is. There's no excitement, there's no passion. It's just
There was no
this is
skin
what
in the game, really.
this is what society expects of me. This is what I'm doing. The most scandalous thing that he offers is eloping, and he
Hmm.
wasn't passionate about it. And
No,
so
he
we
thought
go
that's
back.
what she wanted.
We're going back to the conversation now of, they finally reconnect later in the day after the races. And Penelope is like, okay, shut up, shut up, shut up. Who were you with on your travels? I don't anything else. The girl was biding her time, but you could see like her whole entire face was saying, please just tell me. Please just tell me. Oh, so
Yeah.
you said you were lonely on your travels ever so casually, but we know that
She's
that
like,
girl
I
is
just
dying.
assumed. And he's like, what are you talking about? And then she's like, there
And then
is somebody hoop rolling tonight. Let's forget I said anything.
And I know that he continues to say, oh, I was never lonely. I found myself. But I think what the undertone of what he was saying is, I was never lonely because you helped me find myself. I
Hmm.
saw myself through your eyes. You were there along with me. And I saw myself through your eyes, is very
Hmm.
much of what he is. And then he goes, and then I think when he starts to say these things and then he kind of backtracks, oh, that's not something I'm meant to be saying. I shouldn't be opening my heart, my soul, and letting her in so much, and you do not count.
Yeah.
You up.
It's like I'm swearing off women. I'm a woman. You are Pen. You do not count.
But I think
You're
what
my
he was
friend.
saying, you are not someone who's ever going to entrap me. I don't have the way that Benedict is avoiding girls like the absolute plague with her mamas. That is very much what Colin is saying that he is trying to avoid. I'm going to avoid those girls who are chasing after me for the Bridgerton name, but you do not
Hmm.
count because you see me, Penelope. I can be with you. I can be myself with you. I can interact with you, and it is natural. And he even says that the scene, they come down the staircase in the Featherington house, and he says, our relationship has taken shape so naturally over the years.
Hmm. Yeah.
He doesn't say,
Yeah. He says relationship there. And it's important that, like, that whole wording hurts her feelings. But I see that as he's watched her, like, read her letters, and he's struggled very much too with what goes on in his head compared to what is allowed to come out of his mouth, that
mm-hmm.
sometimes he says the wrong thing. And this is what happened here. What he meant to say was not, you don't count, you are the exception.
Have you seen the movie He's Just Not That Into You? And
Mm-hmm.
the exception versus the rule. It is one of my hands down favorite movies. She is the exception, not the rule.
Yes, he meant
And
to say you are the exception, and that would have been received very differently. But because he chose the wrong words in the moment, and we can see that this is definitely something that plagues him, because when we start, I mean, well, this is second half. You said they have to watch the first half, but I mean, when he starts writing things, he scratches out and picks a different word.
mm-hmm.
And that happens with his brain. He thinks something, he starts to say it, he pauses and redirects all the time. And this moment, he chose the wrong word, he chose the wrong
And
phrase.
I think in that moment where in season 3 we do see him trying to like edit his work constantly, I think he is so enveloped with his thoughts of Penelope that he cannot think straight. And that harkens back to that comment from Violet of, when you were in love, words are lost to you. When you're really in it and you're feeling it. But let's go back. Okay, so we've talked about the letters, we've talked about him finding himself in her words, and then he breaks our little hearts and he trudges off to go find Marina.
Yes, he did.
And I think all of us took a collective breath of, what is this boy doing? He is going backwards. And secondary, she is married. What is he expecting to get out of the situation?
Yes. And I have seen schools of thought where people believed he still wanted her to run away with him, which would have been even more scandalous as a married woman.
I
I
do not
am,
think he did that to his
no,
family.
I am not of that school of thought at all. Colin must apologize when he believes he's wrong. Well, I take it back. Colin must apologize when he believes he's hurt someone. Even if he stands by what he did, if he feels the courage of his convictions, he still has to acknowledge if his actions hurt someone else. So he must make sure she ended up all right. He must apologize for his part in everything that happened to her if it didn't fare well for her. He had to go and do this for his own peace of mind. And also, nobody wanted to hear about his adventures except Penelope, whom he never gets to see because Eloise is always interrupting. So
Mm-hmm.
he goes to the one person that he remembers hung on his every word.
And that was because she was playing a part. And we see that
Yes.
as he goes to her, and the entire interactions between them is she is very much shutting him down. She doesn't want to interact. She doesn't want to engage. She doesn't want to. I think she has also a slight belief that he is there to win her back of sorts. And
Mm-hmm.
I and I both have the same school of thought that that is not what he was doing. I think he feels like she was really done wrong by society because he is very much a forward thinking man and that she was forced into a situation that she did not want to be in. And he needs to make sure that Sir Philip Crane was a good, suitable match, that he was taking care of her, that the children were taken care of, and that she was in a safe environment. I think he
Yes.
needed to know that she was okay with where she was at.
Because he had taken responsibility for her. When he said, let's get married, he took responsibility for her. So he had to clear his responsibility in his mind. He was
Mm-hmm.
still responsible for her until he could make sure she was okay.
Mm-hmm, very much that. And, he leaves that scene with her. She's kind of given him a bit of a verbal beatdown. She's kind of questioned his character, questioned his motives, and she doesn't see him. And I think in this moment he really realizes she doesn't actually see me for who I am. She
And
was
she's
playing a
not the
part,
person I thought she was. Yes.
much that she was playing a part. I was playing a part with her as well. And I think he realizes that they were not a suitable match at all, and that he was trying to force something that society deemed was a good match. Not just society, but his family, as we've seen with Anthony, with Daphne, he's not suitable, he's not suitable, he's not suitable. But in Colin's mind, he's hearing, I'm not suitable.
Mm-hmm.
And so that Marina is a good match because she is not from a well-to-do family like
Distant cousin.
she's a distant cousin from a farm. And so he thinks, okay, well, she's within my reach. And so he leaves Marina with this little tidbit of information from her that Penelope cares for him. And the next scene, we see Anthony and Edwina's to-be nuptials, and they're all standing outside, and they actually finally get a moment alone without Eloise interrupting for now.
Yes, and I think this is they lead into this from their earlier conversation before the wedding is supposed to start, where they're having an adult conversation and Eloise just isn't having it. She wants to talk about Theo, and we see that Colin makes a point of saying, "Hey, for two people who look, who are so close, you are nothing alike." And he's physically, like mentally separating Penelope from
Right.
Eloise because Eloise is always there. And then when he finally gets a chance to talk to her, or she comes up to him, like from the beginning of the wedding to the afternoon, she's like, did you get it all figured out, Colin? Is that a celebratory drink? Like he would have figured out his whole life in that short period of time.
And I
Um,
that she knows that he was pondering. He was standing outside the pond. The first interaction that they have after he visits Marina is they're out by the pond, and he will not make eye contact with her, and he is not engaging with her in the way that he typically does. And I think he
yeah.
did one partially feel a little bit of shame for going to see her, even though he needed that closure. But I think it was also that we know he's a very introverted thinker. He's very pensive, and he takes time to work through his thoughts and feelings because
Mm-hmm.
what society wants him to feel are two different things. And he was left with the tidbit of information that Penelope cares for you. And he doesn't know in what kind of regard that Marina's maybe insinuating that he's
Mm-hmm.
now through. They are at the pond and he will not make eye contact with her. And some could take that as he's not interested and, oh, this girl likes me and I need to keep her at an arm's length. But it is very much he
He's
needs.
processing.
And then we see them at the wedding and that conversation that he has with Eloise and Penelope, and he is now separating in his mind. Penelope is her own person away from Eloise. She is not my sister. She is not related to me. Penelope is a little piece of sunshine. She has these great thoughts. She listens to me. And I think he's starting to piece together these
Yes,
feelings.
very much so. I think it's important the wording, like interaction between Penelope and Eloise right before she sees Colin and walks over to him. Eloise kind of discloses she might have feelings for Theo, and Penn is like, well, what are you going to do about that? And she goes, I just want to go ask him. She's like, why would you do that? She goes, because I need to know. There's no point in me having feelings if I don't know what his feelings are. And as siblings, I think he and Eloise are very similar in character, especially in
Mhm.
that regard. And I don't think Colin would ever say anything until he had some sort of inkling. And we see that through the whole first part of season 3. Like he's doing everything he can to get her to say something, to make some kind of, nod or whatever.
Hold his gaze. That is what he wants.
Yeah. And um, like she's done at that point. She just is not even like looking at him like that. She thinks there's no hope. But at that wedding, when they're talking about purpose, and I saw an interview where they were talking about when they're talking about purpose, they're looking at the wedding cake and it's directly between them. And that was on purpose because they were going to be the next season.
They do that a lot in this season, well, all the seasons. They put a lot of symbolism between the camera angles and the position of where they are
Mhm.
standing in relation to some really pivotal backdrops.
Yes.
And you,
And
and you met as they're at the pond and well, I'm feeding the ducks. It's not a duck.
it's
It's
a
a swan.
swan you're looking at.
Penelope is a swan.
She's not even getting that that's a swan. She says, well, the duck is grateful. Because she still thinks she's a duck. But yeah, they start talking about purpose and she gets so animated. She's like, my purpose is going to make me witty and brave, and it's basically it's going to change me, and it's going to set me free. And then he's like, what can possibly live up to that?
He looked terrified in that moment, like, oh my Lord, I want to better myself for this lady. And she has a long list of things and aspirations that she wants in life. I'm never going to measure up to the expectations of what she wants out of life. When in reality, she wants those things for herself. Like he wants to write the book himself in season 3. She wants those for herself. She does not want someone else to give her those. And that is where construing. She wants to achieve those own things in life and then also have someone who loves her for those things, not
Right.
gives her.
Well, and that's the difference between them. And that's what his arc is. She already knows her purpose is something for her.
Mm-hmm.
Like she knows that then her purpose is something for her. It's not in someone else. But he's always seeking his purpose in someone else, to protect someone else, to be responsible for someone else, a duty to someone else. And I think that comes from being in such a supportive family. And he's
Mm-hmm.
seen that that's how it played out. But she is very much in an unsupportive family. So her purpose is hers.
Yes. She has been raised to believe that you only have yourself to protect you. A little bit like Cressida, you only have yourself. No one else is truly your friend. No one else is going to take care of you. You have to provide for yourself. And she has two very unsupportive parents. We never actually see an interaction between Lord Featherington and Penelope or any of his children for that matter. And I think he
No,
was
but
very much
he
hands
icky
off parent.
looks.
And that is the only time that we see him showing any interest in any child. And it's in and they are children, women. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they've come out to society, so they're technically women now, but realistically, they are children still. And they played that up
He's
in season
definitely
1.
way older.
Yeah, they played that up in season 1 with making Penelope look very childlike. Nicola Coughlan has talked about how she had a much higher voice to kind of play off, and she was also way more people pleasing. And she says, "Oh, everything that I say is yes, Mama. Anything you want, Mama." And then season 2,
Yeah.
she starts to lower her voice, and she starts to, and it drops a little bit. It's still got that sort of like, "Oh, I must people please." It's starting to come down, but she gains from her interactions with Colin, from finding her voice with Eloise, and I think that's also a really important character arc for Penelope, is finding herself outside of Eloise and distinguishing her own thoughts outside of being Eloise's, because Eloise has this tendency to override a situation, and my thoughts are the only ones that matter. She is an amazing character and I will never ever take that away from her, but as every other character in the show, they all have flaws. And Eloise is being a little bit self-important and thinking that her beliefs are Penelope's beliefs as well.
Yes. And just for symbolism's sake, she tells Kate that she narrowed the third wicket
Mm-hmm.
for that Pall Mall game, because everybody talks about all the symbolism in the Pall Mall game, but she specifically tells Kate, "Are you asking me if I narrowed the third wicket by 2 inches from last year?" Yes, I did. So she's a big reason why they have struggled to connect, and so she's narrowed the playing field a little bit to make it harder for them to win together.
Yes. So we see Colin at the wedding. He goes and approaches cousin Jack, and he hears cousin Jack's success with his gem mines overseas in America, and he's now thinking, okay, well, if Marina is not going to be my purpose, I need to elevate myself and where I actually feel worthy as Colin Bridgerton, not Bridgerton Colin. He wants to be first and foremost proud of himself outside of his family name. And so he goes to cousin Jack and he says, oh, okay, let's set something up. Let's be beneficial to each other. And so the next time that we see that, he is in the Featherington house making these dealings with Jack, much to Portia's initial unhappiness because she believes, well, the Bridgertons are untouchable. If you get caught up with them, if you get caught out upsetting the Bridgerton family, we are done for. But the second that the Bridgertons' social standing lowers again after the wedding is failed, Portia says, well, I don't care about the Bridgertons then. They're already dirt in society's eyes. Now is the time to strike, take him for all his worth, because Portia has this drive to be higher in society than everyone else. And I think especially coming from a Baron family, which is the lowest of the 5 titles given by the Queen. And so she feels like she needs to climb up the social. So to take the Bridgertons down a step is, in her eyes, the greatest thing that she can achieve.
Yeah, and we know why in season 3. She
Yes.
says why. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's very interesting. He Colin finishes the conversation with cousin Jack, and he asks Penelope to escort him down the stairs. Super improper.
Yes, they cannot do that by themselves. She is not someone to escort him out. And the whole conversation is about him investing and thinking about the future, and if the mine's successful, he'll make money and it'll help her family, which is his greatest incentive for doing it. And she's like, I didn't know you thought that highly of my family. And he goes, well, I tend not to hang out with people I don't admire. And she says, I never really thought of that. And this is important to me because he's the one saying it to her. Like, he's convincing her that I know our relationship has, shaped so naturally over the years. It's like he's convincing her. She's, oh, I never thought about it that way, but she's thinking family. He's thinking you.
And he underpins this by one of his first statements that he says is, she says, oh, I didn't think you were interested in investment. And he says, well, I'm starting to see things differently. As in, I now pondered the words that Marina has said. I have pondered that I am important to you, that you would never forsake me. And it is now time for me to do my part as a male to elevate myself to a point that I am worthy of you. And I think that's very much the undertone of what he was saying. Even if he doesn't, let's be real, even if he doesn't know all of this in his mind yet, his heart knows exactly, I'm taking this step, then this step, then this step, because he believes there are steps that you must take before you can propose to a lady. And he does. He sees her as a lady, and he sees her as the highest of ladies, as we see in season 3, when he tells Portia that, she is the most eligible of us all, and really on that pedestal of explaining exactly how highly he thinks of her.
Yes. And then, and we get to the end of Jack where he uncovers everything. And this is the first time, honestly, too, this is the first time we've seen him dance with anyone since season 1, Marina.
Yes. We see him dancing with Cressida. And that moment was gut wrenching because, like, as viewers, I think we know that there is something underhand at play, but we don't know what yet. And even Penelope, she can't get past her own feelings to think, oh, well, maybe this is for a reason. She can't think rationally that Colin would never do this. Colin would never forsake me for Cressida. She knows what he thinks of Cressida. He thinks of her of being the love party because of her cruelty. So she cannot understand why would he be dancing with Cressida? And he's being quite forward with her,
to get the necklace.
He's putting on that full.
It's crafty Colin. Never know when
Rough.
he's going to strike.
Yes.
And then
And
he just walks right up to her and grabs her hand, like, come with me.
he does such a forward way that I think even she takes a like a little gasp of like, oh, like she's excited. She doesn't know what it's about, but she's like, this is Colin is living the adrenaline high right now. He is living his savior complex. And he's like, I'm gonna save this family. I'm gonna elevate them. I'm gonna save them from ruin. I'm going to be the man of the house.
Yeah. When he does that speech and outs him, it's important to note that he says, Ladies Featherington, who
Mm-hmm.
have not a father or a husband among them, but Penelope has neither a father nor a husband. That is still simply a statement about her, but he had to craft it and practice it to make sure he did not reveal he was only talking about her. Because
Mm-hmm.
when she leaves the room, and of course, Happy Colin has to dance, we are
Mm-hmm.
dancing.
He's our little happy.
When Colin's happy, he's got to dance.
Or
And
you know,
and then he tells her, like, she's like, I'm so glad, you are looking after my family. And he's like, I will always look after you.
yes. And I
So
think in his speech in front of Portia and Jack, he wants it to be known that he's protecting them. But when it is just the two of them, he very much lets it be known because obviously he can be a little bit more open with her, whereas Portia is very cunning and will pick up on the terminology that he uses. And he's now trying to be a little bit more thoughtful the words he uses. And he says, it was for you. You know, he wants
mhm.
her to wasn't protecting your family. I was by extension because I wanted to protect you. I wanted to be there for you. I will always be there to protect you.
Yes.
And we can see like he sweeps her onto the dance floor. Like, this is very much one of those like moments where it is swept onto the dance floor. He's swept up in his emotions. He is not holding back how he feels in this moment. He's very vulnerable because he's excited and he doesn't want to hold back with Penelope because she's the one person that he can be open and honest with. And it is so to the point that even, I don't want to say gentlemen, the other lords, the other unwed lords notice this because it is of such note, sort of like when Anthony and Kate are dancing together at the end, it is of such note that people pay attention. So we left off with Penelope and Colin are dancing away and to the point like they are enjoying themselves so immensely. The time that we see some of the biggest connection between Penelope and Colin is when they are dancing. And I think that is because they feel less inhibited because they are expressing themselves in a way to each other that is deemed okay in society.
Yes.
And it is a way that men can court women in a proper fashion in society. And I think that is what leads to the conversation that Colin has outside with Lord Fife and the other men. I would not dignify by calling them gentlemen because they are
Gentlemen.
not.
And they
They
even
are
admit
not.
they're not.
They are not a gentleman between us. I think the reason that they brought that up is because whether Colin wants to admit it at this point or not, the relationship between them is palpable. And he even uses the term relationship. And I know
Mhm.
that you and I have a relationship, my husband and I have a relationship, my son and I have a relationship. And that word in English is very broad. But I do think that he was using that specific word to say that there is more of an attachment forming between them. I think that is a big reason why he went to her rescue and basically scared Jack out of town. And he very much said, if he does not leave, I will sort this out for you. Do not worry. I will always be here to protect you. And
Yes.
in that moment, I think he feels, and I use this term, but it is not a term that we would use in current day to describe it. But he very much in that moment feels like a man. He feels like a man who is protecting a woman who is protecting someone he loves, and he feels like the man of the house, and he feels like the head of the household because he is fulfilling that role.
Yes, absolutely. And he
So
tells her, basically, the two of them make promises to each other. They come to an understanding in the world of Regency era courtship because he says, You are special to me. I will always look out for you. And she says, As you are to me. Like that is an understanding between two adult eligible people. So even if he tries to evade, there was definite emotion in the dancing. He's happy, he's protecting her, he feels like he's found his purpose again because he believes his purpose is to be he's a white knight. He's got a white knight. Every lady in the room, he's got to find the person that needs the most protecting and protect them. But in that moment, like he acknowledges for the first time, I think, because with Marina, he talked about like she manipulated him, but he talked about when we're married, we'll be a family. Like I will be your family. And for him,
Whereas
family is so supportive.
Penelope was always his family.
He doesn't have to say that. So he tells her that she's special to him. And that very much back then would have been, if anyone would have overheard it, everybody would assume they were secretly
Yeah,
engaged.
I can very much see why Lord Fife and his friends made the connection that they did. Because to anyone else, what Colin was doing, the way that he was acting with her, the holding of her hand, the dancing with her, the approaching her at every single event, every single ball, laughing with her, they were very much forming an attachment to the Ton's eyes. And it is actually surprising that not more people notice. Portia she had dismissed Penelope in her mind so long before and only focused on Prudence and Philippa to the point that even when someone whom she had been wanting to marry into that family for such a long time, even when that was presenting right in front of her, she didn't even see it in the same way that Penelope doesn't see it because her whole entire life she's been pushed aside, she's been unnoticed, and her mum has made her feel, and her whole family actually, as we see Philippa and Prudence joking with her that Colin wouldn't be writing to her, that she
Mm-hmm.
isn't someone of note, and therefore she cannot see that he truly has feelings for her because she is so deep down in her self-esteem.
Yes. In
And
that
the
moment, though,
next
I feel like she believes he does because the next time we see her, she's kind
I
of tripping down the hallway to her room.
She's
Like,
a bit of a spring in her step because he has done something that is so truly husband like. He has very much acted her husband in this moment. And I think even if she doesn't, and I think this is it, I think he fed into her fantasy. He fed
mm-hmm.
into her fantasy that she had held for so long that she believes will never come true. But it didn't matter if it was going to come true or not because he fed into that fantasy and she could go to bed that night thinking, Colin has saved me. And it's given her hope, you know? And that is
Yes.
something Marina no longer holds. You talk about juxtaposition in your TikTok episodes a lot between different characters, and that is a huge juxtaposition between those two. Is that Penelope is someone that holds hope. She's someone that fantasizes. She's someone that lives for those fantasies, and he has given her a moment that even if she doesn't not believe that that fantasy can ever come to fruition, that it gives her something to feel excited about in the meantime. So we go
Mm-hmm.
from that. She has the big bust up with Eloise, where she actually holds her own. Eloise discovers that she's Lady Whistledown, but she holds her own in that moment. At first, she is apologetic because she does truly feel bad for the implications of Eloise being hurt, just like how Colin apologizes. But Penelope is a little bit more, she wants to explain why her motivations behind things.
Mm-hmm.
And when Eloise fails to see any part of it and kind of disregards everything that she has done as Lady Whistledown down to just gossip, just cruelty, and doesn't see the merit in it, that is when Kitty's claws come out and she kind of holds her own and says, well, actually, Eloise, you are jealous. I have achieved what you have always talked about achieving. You are all talk, and I actually did something, and you are jealous of that. And this is the
Yes.
time we see her standing up for herself. She's just had this big moment where where she has watched Colin stand up for herself, and these two emulate in each other what they want, how they want to be. They see each other through each other's eyes, and they give each other strength. So she has just watched Colin pull apart cousin Jack and really be the man of the house, and now Penelope is going to play her part. She's going to start finding her voice, and she is going to hold her own and exactly tell Eloise exactly as she thinks.
Yes. She tries to stand up for herself, and then Eloise tells her she never wants to see her again. And she's got to go find her because I mean, that's best friend breakups are harder than romantic breakups.
Oh,
Um,
I concur with that one.
And these girls have been, I mean, they're basically sisters. And so she knew like she had to make it right. Like she said a lot of things in the moment because she was angry. And that's something that I love about Penelope as a character, that she never judges how a person acts in a situation because she understands. She lives in a family that they are very impulsive and vindictive, and she
But
sees.
they are intentionally cruel. It is not an impulsive choice that they make to be cruel. They are intentionally cruel.
Yes. And but she understands, like, I mean, Prudence is intentionally cruel for sure, but she knows her mother has to do what her mother needs to do to help the
Mm-hmm.
family survive. I think Penelope just sees the people she loves for exactly who they are. And
And she accepts it.
yeah, and she holds no judgment. So after her emotions calm down, she realizes, whoa, I said some things. I have to go make this right. And she goes and looks for her. And she just happens upon this group of ungentlemanly men.
Men.
And Lord Fife, who has been mentioned twice this season in with a specific lady in compromising situations, one at this very dance, at this very ball. And I think he's trying to announce that there's bigger gossip here than him because he doesn't want to get caught and have to
And
marry this girl.
the scene with Penelope in her house, he says, I do not make a habit of being seen with people that I do not hold high value. And then just mere scenes later, we see Colin with Lord Fife and these boys, which is quite an interesting take from the words that he just said, because he's still trying to come to terms with standing on his own 2 feet and his own convictions. And I think he knows that these men are not his friends. They are just acquaintances in society. And you had a very interesting thought as to why he may have said what he said. I have no justification in my heart for the words that come out of his mouth because it just tears me apart every time.
It is an anomaly in his character, and therefore there must be intention behind it. That is my school of thought. He is very consistent in his how he is with his family. He is very consistent of character, and this was an anomaly. So you have to take out the anomaly and study the environment in which it occurs. And one, he is surrounded by people that are not a safe space for him. Because he did elevate himself and he feels like a man. Who is a man in his eyes? Anthony. Anthony is figuring out his own way right now with Kate and not hanging out with these gentlemen. And I think Colin slides in as the Bridgerton of the group to kind of promote himself. Like he feels more mature. So he's going to associate and, see if any of these people are worth his time. Because this is the first time we see him really interacting with any of this group. Anthony was interacting with them at the beginning of season 2. So I think he's trying to elevate himself socially since Anthony's kind of out of the rake picture. Like this is the group of rake friends, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think he's trying to fit
The
into that group, take Anthony's place, and immediately ends up in the lion's den a little over his head. And Fife, who has done something clearly heinous by being in a closet with a young lady for 20 minutes
mm-hmm.
and knows this gossip is out there, is trying to call him out in front of this whole big group outside, crowded garden. And I believe he absolutely knew it was not a safe place, and he was protecting himself and protecting Penelope's privacy. And it
And
was not intended for her ears.
I think that that statement actually, we see that kind of play out in season 3, where the men are very aware of, oh, I do not want to linger here too long because Lady Whistledown might write about it. And we see them say that on multiple occasions, or,
Yes.
and I think you may be onto something with the fact of Fife was very much trying to take the attention away from himself and spread what could have been an even larger gossip, because as we see, the Bridgertons are mentioned most commonly and very favorably in Whistledown's columns. So for him to then say, oh, well, there's this Bridgerton gossip because, you've got your tiers of who's important in society, and the Bridgertons are right up there. So if he can drop this little nugget to Lady Whistledown of, oh, are these two courting, that distracts away from him being in a closet, which is arguably far more interesting.
And it
I
works
mean,
for him because he comes back in season 3 unmarried. So he was not forced to marry this girl. So that gossip did not get out, which we know
yes,
why, because Penelope was crushed.
yeah, well,
She,
because Penelope knows, because she's the one who gives that little tidbit of information to Eloise that night. So we know that she knows this information, and yet we do not see it written about in Lady
mm-hmm,
Whistledown, because she had a way bigger piece of information thrust upon her in the form of self-realization of, oh, my fantasy is now gone.
mm-hmm,
He does not see me in the way that I want to be seen. And not only that, but he is willing to disrespect me in front of an entire group of eligible bachelors. Therefore, he sees me in way lower standing than what I thought he did.
mm-hmm.
My whole perception of him is completely crushed, and she is left blundering of, who is this Colin, and do I even know him?
Yes, she
That
was
is where,
hurt, very much hurt. It changed her fundamentally because he has always told her positive, encouraging things.
yes,
And
to
when
her
she
face.
is to her face and when she's not present, she hears this. And yes, it's Colin using, a poor choice of words, but he also was, I think if she was not already upset because of her fight with Eloise, she would have been able to take in the atmosphere, the gentleman in the group, the fact that these are people Colin's not hung out with before. She's a very much an observer, and I think she would be able to understand his intention had she been in a little more of a calm state of mind, but she wasn't. And what he said, like,
I
she
think,
just lost her best friend, and it just crushed her to the core to hear him feel similarly to everything that Eloise just said.
yeah, very much so. She feels crushed on all fronts, and fundamentally changing how she feels, not necessarily about the Bridgerton family, but specifically about those two, that they are someone that she's revered so highly for so long. She's cared about above all else, because I truly believe that Eloise and Penelope, I know that they have their issues in this season, but I think, how people talk about love and relationships as being, oh, this person is my soulmate, but I truly believe that um, that friendship can run as deeply as relationships go.
Mm-hmm.
As we see in society nowadays, a lot of friendships outlast most relationships.
Correct.
And that's not to downplay the relationship that she has with Colin, but I think the relationship she has with Eloise is just as important. And I think that is why this season transpired the way that it did, with Penelope kind of getting a little bit fed up with Eloise, trying to steer her opinions, trying to tell her how she feels and what she should feel and what she should want out of life. And the fact that she's not willing to listen to her ideas and just wants to kind of force her own way. I think we needed Penelope to go through that transformation within both relationships with Colin and Eloise, to find her own voice instead of hiding behind them.
Yes. And I find it interesting that, and I think the reason she is able to think through it and forgive so easily, because she is like the best forgiver there is, where Colin's the best apologizer. So I think their marriage is gonna go well. She forgives so quickly, and because what really affected her the most, these are the people that have always been her champions. They've always, like, she felt like they loved her above all else. But
The only
when,
for her.
yeah, when Eloise cut her down, she used the words of Cressida Calvert.
Mm-hmm.
When Colin said what he said, unbeknownst to him, those are the very words of Portia and Prudence
Mm.
Featherington. So she, all these words she's in bullying and mocking, she's been hearing all these years. She heard the very same words come from mouths that have never spoken poorly about her.
Yeah, and I think that is the fantastic transition into season 3, because it frees her in a way, by cutting those ties with both of them. As hard as it was for her to go through, it freed her to kind of find her own voice, to find her own footing, to stop putting them both on pedestals and see them for who they truly are. And I think that is where we will leave off for today, because In our next episode, we'll be definitely delving into, I know I said it last time, but I really wanted to. I know that I talked about in my own portion of the podcast seasons 1 and 2, but I thought it was so important for you and I because mine was looking more at the looks and some of those underpinning kind of meanings. But you and I, we have deep dive um, into so many thoughts in the last 2 episodes that we've done together. And I think we needed to kind of hash out our feelings on both of those for people to be able to cohesively understand where our points of view are coming from for season 3 and everything that
Yes.
happens in it. So if anyone has any specific ideas that they would like us to talk about in season 3, please go onto the Facebook page Lady Whistledown, a Bridgerton podcast, and leave your thoughts, feelings, desires in there. And for today, I think we will leave it here. So thank you for all those who have tuned in and listened to the musings of 2 mad women now. Yours truly, Lady Whistledown.
And yours truly, Lady P.